And hello, welcome to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. Today's topic is, of course, the subject of the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, having resigned from office yesterday. Nigel Farage, off the back of that news, has demanded a general election. And today we are going to break down for you what the Labour plan is. Of course, that is for Andy Burnham, who won in the Makerfield by-election, to almost in a coronation replace Keir Starmer, not only without a new general election, taking it to the British public, but also likely to be the case without an internal Labour Party election. In other words, Andy Burnham is likely by the Labour Party to be coronated as leader of the party without contest now that he won his MP seat in the by-election of Makerfield and quit as Mayor of Greater Manchester. And that coronation as the leader of the Labour Party means necessarily, because due to the British parliamentary system, he becomes automatically sworn in by the monarch as Prime Minister because the Labour Party has the majority of seats in Parliament. So that is the Labour Party's route to getting Andy Burnham to becoming Prime Minister. Nigel Farage has called instead for a general election for the British public to get to decide who their next Prime Minister is. And he has argued that Andy Burnham not only has no mandate to govern this country, but also nobody really knows what he stands for. In this stream, we're going to go through some of those arguments and discuss some of the controversial policies that are waiting down the line to snap at Andy Burnham and potentially cause controversy during his future likely premiership. So that is the stream for today. The cartoon or the graphic that we have accompanied today's stream with should be on your screens about now. It is by Peter Brooks, Sunday Times cartoonist, and it's got a text at the top there on the top left of the screen coming up, buyer's remorse. And these are cardboard cutouts of Andy Burnham, and Labour voters presumably are lining up at a returns and exchange desk with buyer's remorse, returning a broken Andy Burnham who doesn't seem to be working. And that buyer's remorse is indeed what is likely to be the defining sense of Andy Burnham's potential premiership. The Labour Party is, as it stands, woefully out of touch with the British public, and they have just carved out a path for an even more left-wing leader than Keir Starmer to become Prime Minister by becoming leader of the Labour Party, proving that they are completely out of touch with the British public, and hence Farage demanding a new general election to address the gap between what the public currently wants, and we know this because it's surveyable, and what the public return in poll after poll after poll is a Reform Party lead in the polls. If there were a general election tomorrow, then according to the polling data at least, the Reform Party would get the largest share in Parliament. And so, of course, it suits Farage to call for a general election, but there is a deeper point here, and that is that does the Labour Party, and in particular does Andy Burnham, any longer hold a mandate to govern? So that is our stream. Again, the title on your screens there, British PM Starmer resigns and Farage demands a general election. Don't go anywhere. All of that is coming up here on the Warrior Creed live stream right after these opening credits.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Back to the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today's stream, as we have just mentioned in the introduction, British PM Starmer wins and Farage demands a general election. That is the topic. The cartoon for today's stream should be on your screens about now. If we can bring it up again one more time for you to see. We do think it's prescient. It is headed coming up buyer's remorse. There's a returns and exchange desk with presumably Labour voters or Burnham voters specifically queuing up to return a unworking Andy Burnham to the returns and exchange desk. One assumes that this is a commentary on what the potential future of Andy Burnham's likely premiership will look like. Of course, it remains to be seen, but it is likely to be the case that the British public will be somewhat unhappy with Andy Burnham. So that is what we're going to be discussing today, a new feature for today's stream. Hopefully you can see it. Is a ticker at the bottom. This is where you can find Radical Media at majidnawaz.substack.com. And if you go to that, which is now on the ticker at the bottom, majidnawaz.substack.com, you'll find Radical Media. We encourage everybody to go there, subscribe. If free subscribers, of course, get access to the weekly Radical Dispatch, but premium subscribers, paying subscribers, get access to behind the paywall content, which is the full Radical Dispatch, including large chunks behind the paywall, in addition to the podcast version of this stream. Let's move to the topic. Many of you would have by now, of course, heard that Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has resigned. President Trump himself predicted as much a day before it happened. But of course, the writing was already on the wall. Keir Starmer, in fact, the Labour Party, recognizing that Keir Starmer was no longer tenable as a leader of their party, were effectively pushing him out. But Keir Starmer's manner in which he resigned reflects more his lack of concern over timing. And it does indicate instead that he handed Andy Burnham a very difficult transition moment, because reports are that Burnham would have preferred for Keir Starmer to wait until after the summer. Summers are always difficult in economically hard times. There is civil unrest. Of course, this summer may not be any different. Everything that's happened up until now to go by, but there are a few other very hot topic issues that Andy Burnham is going to end up being lumbered with, that Keir Starmer could well have taken the flak for over the course of this summer, including any potential civil unrest, so that by the time he stood down, Andy Burnham could have weathered most of the storm as new leader, joining as Prime Minister after much controversy over the summer had already transpired and fallen on the head of Keir Starmer. But by leaving immediately, Keir Starmer is leaving a big mess for Andy Burnham to pick up on, and it may not necessarily go too well. In fact, we do not think it will go too well. Now, on your screens now is the Times headline. When Starmer announced his resignation yesterday, you should be able to see that. And just for thoroughness' sake, we are going to play for you the speech, Keir Starmer's resignation speech. Many people have said this was the first time Keir Starmer showed any sign of emotion at all during his entire life. And that was at the end of this speech, where a tearful Keir Starmer was speaking about returning to his family and children, almost in relief that this big burden, which of course it's a huge burden to be Prime Minister, was lifted from his shoulders. Though clearly, if it was that great a burden, I mean, he didn't really want to resign. Looks like his hand was forced. But still, this is the speech Keir Starmer gave outside 10 Downing Street. The music that appears in the middle of this speech and then remains there for much of it while he's announcing his resignation, you may feel it is odd. No, it's not the practice of the British government to be playing music as a Prime Minister announces his resignation outside the door of number 10, which you can see in the image here in the in-screen. But this music that you're about to hear was apparently, reportedly, a anti-Brexit campaigner who had lined up on the streets. Of course, remember, 10 Downing Street is a street. And though it used to be the case, you could walk right up to that front door when we were young. You could walk right up to that black door behind the Prime Minister there, and you could actually take a photo or a selfie if one had a camera in those days, not a smartphone. But the War on Terror years changed all of that. And just like the public gallery in Parliament used to be an open gallery, now anyone that goes into the Houses of Parliament to listen to debates must sit behind perspex screens. Likewise, 10 Downing Street is no longer a pedestrian street, though you can walk right up to the street itself on a main road and still see the door of number 10 from where you are able to walk. And so there was a anti-Brexit campaigner playing what is apparently the anthem of the EU, which is Beethoven's Ode to Joy. That's what you'll be hearing behind Keir Starmer as he speaks here. So without further ado, and just for thoroughness, many of you would have already seen this, but just for thoroughness and for the sake of the podcast as well, we're going to play Keir Starmer's resignation speech. This is the British Prime Minister resigning yesterday outside number 10.
Thank you. Thank you. Walking up this street 2 years ago was the proudest moment of my life. A new Labour government, the first in 14 years. A page in our country's history turned after years of disappointment and despair. The chance to change the lives of millions of people for the better. That's what I came into politics for. The journey to that point was not easy. 6 years ago, I inherited a Labour Party that was politically, financially, and morally bankrupt. I was told time and time again that my party was finished, that we were consigned to history, that a majority at the general election, let alone a landslide majority, was impossible. But we proved those people wrong. Because we changed our party, ripping out the poison of anti-Semitism, restoring trust on the economy, defence and national security, and becoming a party that once again stood proudly with, not against, our national flag. The hard work of change was with a singular purpose, not power for power's sake, but to change Britain for the better, to build a fairer country with dignity and respect, where everyone is seen, everyone is valued, wealth and opportunity for all, not just the privileged few. And look at what we've achieved in just 2 years. An economy that is stronger, growing faster than our peers, wages rising faster than inflation in every single month since we came to power, investment secured, infrastructure being built, an end to austerity, the fastest fall in NHS waiting lists for 17 years, the biggest improvement in rights for workers and renters in a generation, the biggest uplift in defence spending since the Cold War, small boat crossings falling, asylum hotels closing, protecting young people from social media, and 500,000 children being lifted out of poverty because of the choices that I made. Our reputation in the world restored, with Britain once again standing up for decency, respect and the rule of law, securing trade deals, standing with Ukraine, standing up for our values, and rebuilding our relationship with our allies in Europe. Change promised by a Labour government, change delivered by a Labour government. But I know the question being asked now is not who was best placed to change the Labour Party, to take us into power, to begin the vital work of improving lives for millions of people. Those questions have been answered. The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September. I will remain in post as Prime Minister until the contest is complete, and I will do everything I can to ensure an orderly handover of power. I will also give my successor my full and unequivocal support, knowing that they will inherit a Britain that is far stronger and fairer than the one I inherited 2 years ago, better prepared for the challenges ahead, and better able to ensure the Labour Party secures a second term in office. I want to thank all of those friends and colleagues who have been at my side for these past 6 years or so, for their incredible commitment, service and support. I want to thank the brilliant Number 10 staff and our country's extraordinary civil service who dedicate their lives to public service. And when I leave the biggest job in the country, I shall spend more time on the most important job, being the best husband I can to my fantastic wife, Vic, who has been a rock by my side through good times and bad, and being the best dad I can to my beautiful children, who are my pride and my joy. Thank you very much.
Now that was the resignation speech there of the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Many of you may have seen that yesterday. We just showed it again for you. At the end, you saw some of the burst of emotion that Keir Starmer perhaps strangely hadn't demonstrated prior to that in his tenure. But upon resigning, you saw him almost break down in tears. Many people reacted to that speech without any sympathy for him by the end of it, and the reason is because there are a plethora of issues under Keir Starmer that either were covered up or unaddressed, and they are issues very real harm to the collective psyche, but also physical harm to this country and the people of this country. The most prominent example of that is the case of grooming gangs. Keep in mind that at the beginning of the year, Keir Starmer personally chose to whip every single Labour MP against the statutory grooming gangs inquiry. What does that mean, to whip an MP against it? Keir Starmer basically told all Labour MPs who hold a majority in Parliament, if you do not vote against this grooming gang inquiry, you will lose your jobs. That is what a whip is. And as a result, the statutory inquiry for grooming gangs didn't happen. Subsequent to that, the Home Office, in a huge mea culpa moment, has admitted the extent of the problem. Of course, the story is no longer being denied, including by the previously staunch deniers at the Labour Party. The mood around that story has completely changed since Keir Starmer whipped every single Labour MP against the grooming gang inquiry. But of course, there has been no inquiry, even though the mood has changed. And many people are unable to forgive Keir Starmer for that because, of course, the real world harm done in refusing an inquiry into the group-based underage rape and sexual exploitation of young British girls predominantly is a real world harm. And it's something also that has now affected the collective psyche of the nation. People are understandably furious at Keir Starmer. And that's just one example of the disaster that has been his premiership. Such a disaster that despite having an overwhelming majority in Parliament, with no threat to his power from the outside, Keir Starmer's had to resign due to threats from inside, because that's how bad his premiership was. Now, listening to that speech, you'd get none of that sense. Instead, he was rattling off lists of successes. But most of the country right now isn't remembering him for anything but failure, as perplexed as he may well be with the assessment of the country. That's simply the truth of it. GB News now on your screens. They've reported yesterday that Andy Burnham confirmed that he will stand as the Labour leader following Keir Starmer's resignation. And again, we'll just play you, again, just for completeness, we'll play you, even though many of you may have seen this yesterday. And of course, these days, a day in the news cycle already feels that yesterday's news is old. It used to be a week that you'd go with the same topics. These days, every day, new news arises that makes yesterday's news feel old. But we are, I think, for thoroughness, still going to show you the video of the GB News announcement of Andy Burnham, reading Andy Burnham's announcement more accurately from his social media, that he has decided to indeed become leader of the Labour Party, because this sets the groundwork for what we're going to go into, which is how what may well be his ascension to the premiership. So we'll blow that up on your screen so you can see it. And this is just GB News reading Andy Burnham's announcement that he will indeed run as leader of the Labour Party, probably uncontested.
Andy Burnham, currently the Mayor of Greater Manchester. He has responded to this morning's event in a tweet on X. He said, "Keir has given huge service to our country, and I want to thank him for his leadership and dedication during such a challenging period."
His decision marks the beginning of a transition, and it is important that this process is conducted in an orderly and responsible way.
"I will put myself forward as part of that process. The country expects stability, seriousness, and a continued focus on the issues that matter most, and that is what it will get."
As we move forward, our priority must be to work together to get the country back to where we all want it to be. People want to see progress on economic growth, cost of living, public services, housing, and opportunities for the next generation.
Political change should never distract from the responsibility to improve people's lives. The Labour movement has always been at its strongest when it looks forward with confidence and purpose.
And this is what we will do from here, and we will make sure this transition is a positive process of renewal for our party and our country. That is Andy Burnham's statement following the Prime Minister announcing his intention to stand down as Labour Party leader and, of course, as Prime Minister, sounding, Miriam, quite prime ministerial himself. I wonder why.
And it took him about an hour to post that. Clearly, you've been having some discussions probably about how to respond. He's going to put himself forward. Doesn't know yet, of course, whether or not anybody else will. If they don't, if he is the only candidate for the leadership, he could be Prime Minister by the 16th of July.
And as of yet, you heard the date there, 16th of July, pending anyone else putting themselves forward. As of yet, nobody else has put themselves forward. For our non-British viewers and listeners, the peculiarities of the British system that is that it's a parliamentary system. The party, the political party that has a majority in our lower chamber, not even the upper chamber, which remains unelected. It's by appointment only till today. But the lower chamber, the House of Commons, is where this all matters. The party that gets a majority in the House of Commons, the lower chamber, has the right to form the executive branch or form government. It is a fused system that Britain has. The executive branch and the legislature are fused as one. So to repeat that, the party that has a majority in the House of Commons gets to form government. Of course, the Labour Party has that majority. By becoming leader of the Labour Party in the House of Commons, Andy Burnham would, by default, become prime minister in the United Kingdom. That's how it works here, as peculiar as that may sound to others outside of the UK, especially for those that have a presidential system with direct presidential elections. That is nevertheless how it works in the UK. And that is, of course, causing some controversy, which we'll get to, and that is people like Nigel Farage demanding a general election because Andy Burnham is going to be uncontested even from within the Labour Party as it stands, let alone having a mandate from the British public. You can see here now on your screens the Financial Times reporting that Wes Streeting MP, currently the Secretary of State for Health, who was up until this point seen to be the strongest challenger against Andy Burnham, announced immediately, almost as if a deal has already been cut. And you can see here the Financial Times stating this announcement that he will not be contesting Andy Burnham's leadership bid within the Labour Party. This is the Financial Times just in. It says, Wes Streeting has thrown his support behind Andy Burnham in an indication that the former Greater Manchester Mayor will be able to succeed Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister without a contest. That, insofar as Wes Streeting is concerned, applies also to other contenders. Nobody else has raised their head. So in answer to what happens now, you can see the Times reporting from 22nd of June. That's on your screens. What happens now? Keir Starmer has resigned. And when could we have a new Prime Minister? Well, just to go through some of that for you, on July the 9th, as the Times reports there, Starmer said that nominations would open for anyone who wishes to replace him on July the 9th. So far, only Andy Burnham has thrown his hat in the ring. Any candidate must be a Labour MP and secure the backing of 20% of the Parliamentary Labour Party, which equates currently to 81 MPs. Andy Burnham has that backing. So it's not easy for anyone else to come and challenge Burnham for Starmer's position. They would have to have the backing of 20% of the Parliamentary Party, that's the MPs, and that equates currently, due to the huge majority that Keir Starmer's Labour Party have in Parliament, which, by the way, even though it's a majority in terms of seats, our regulars will remember that translates to a razor-thin seat-by-seat majority when you look at the actual votes in each constituency or in each seat. Labour only scraped over the edge in each of those seats, though because of course we have the winner takes all, first past the post system. Scraping over the edge in each constituency still means they get that entire seat in the House of Commons. So that's how they got such a huge majority. But actually their majority is quite thinly spread across the country, and that makes it susceptible to swings of public opinion. And you can see in by-elections that coming into play when Labour lose by-elections, even though they had such a huge majority, is because they had only won that by-election with a thin majority in the seat itself. And that actually describes the status even of Wes Streeting's own seat in Ilford, a Labour potential leadership candidate who said he's stepping aside for Andy Burnham. He's currently the Secretary of State for Health. Wes Streeting's only held his seat in Ilford with 500 votes, which is absolutely nothing when it comes to parliamentary elections. And so that gives you an example of such a senior Secretary of State running the health of the country, the health services of the country, only has a majority of 500 votes. And of course, if there were an election tomorrow, Wes Streeting very well could lose his seat. And that would apply to the Labour Party leader. It would apply to all of them. Of course, Andy Burnham's personal mandate for being an MP in the Makerfield by-election is quite significantly higher because he has a huge personal following. Still, back to what the Times describes as what happens next. You can see there, July the 9th date. So any contender against Burnham would require 20% of the Parliamentary Labour Party. Because of the size of their majority at the moment, that means 81 MPs would have to back them. There is nobody else that has that level of support other than Burnham at the moment. It continues because under Labour rules, this is being treated as a vacancy rather than a challenge to the leadership. They must then also get support from either 5% of the constituency Labour parties or 3 affiliated organisations, including at least 2 trade unions. So keep in mind, because of these rules, the fact that this is being treated as a vacancy rather than a challenge to the leadership means that any potential leader must also then get 5% of the constituency Labour Party's support or 3 affiliated organizations, including at least 2 trade unions, anything could happen. The trade unions may decide they don't like Andy Burnham, but at the moment, as it stands, there is no contender other than him to take over the leadership of the Labour Party. The Times continues what will happen then. This is all from July 9th, now July the 16th. By July the 16th, it states the Commons rises for summer recess on July the 16th, by which time Starmer said nominations would be completed. If only one candidate, such as Burnham, qualified, there would be no ballot of members. He would be declared leader and could be invited by the King to form a government almost immediately. That is when? By July the 16th. This is the most likely scenario, says the Times, especially as Wes Streeting, the former health secretary, who was considered Burnham's main rival, folded in behind him on Monday. However, it is not impossible that a different candidate could emerge. Another would-be challenger could be Al Khan's, the former defense minister, who has not yet ruled himself out. There is a potential Burnham could be challenged, but it's unlikely at the moment, according to the Times. If someone else was to throw their hat in the ring and get enough backing, the contest would then go to Labour members, affiliated supporters and trade unionists under one member, one vote. So those extra procedures kick in, including getting the trade union support if someone decides to challenge Burnham. If no one challenges him, he'll end up being leader by default. Candidates would campaign through the summer with hustings, union endorsements, and factional manoeuvring likely to decide the shape of the race. Members would then vote using a preferential system. But that's only if someone challenges Burnham. What would likely happen by September? Well, if there is a contest, again, reading from the Times, Labour figures want the new leader in place before MPs return from the summer recess and, crucially, before Labour Party conference at the end of September. The winner would become Labour leader and, because the party has a Commons majority, also Prime Minister without a general election. And that point there, without a general election, that's the controversy that people like Nigel Farage are raising. Burnham doesn't have a mandate from the British public. Now, there are a number of issues due to Burnham's lack of mandate that have caused quite some controversy and may well come down the line to haunt Burnham in the manner that this cartoon for today's stream suggests. That is the buyer's remorse and people wanting to return and exchange Burnham for a new leader. Those number of issues that could well come down the line to haunt Andy Burnham, Prime Minister Burnham, keeping in mind he doesn't have a mandate, are quite serious topics that the public is already quite disturbed by. Now, let's start with this one, and that is, you should be able to see on your screens now, in the little inset box there, grooming gangs. This is a topic that will not leave Labour alone, and in particular, Andy Burnham is personally implicated in a Manchester cover-up of grooming gangs, not only implicated in the cover-up by anybody, but specifically implicated by the very person, the voice, the whistleblower on grooming gangs, who commands attention. And that is former police detective, investigator on many of the underage rape grooming gang cases, Maggie Oliver, who has specifically accused Burnham of covering up the report into the Manchester cases where he was mayor. This is a topic that is most likely to come back and haunt any future Burnham premiership. So we're going to show you how. Here are some videos. So on your screens now, you should be able to see somebody posting as Caroline UK at Gasco157 saying, Andy Burnham heckled about grooming gangs by members of the public, heckled as a cover-up. Here is Andy Burnham being heckled by members of the public, being accused of covering up the grooming gangs, and we're just going to play it for you. It is a bit chaotic. You'll be able to probably work out some of the shouts and responses, but it isn't too long. But it's just to give you a flavor of what will probably be chasing Burnham over the course of any potential future premiership.
To Manchester, following an interview that I heard Oliver on the BBC, where she said, just briefly, because there's been comments made about the independents, where Maggie Oliver said that she had been part of an investigation that had been closed down overnight. I was not prepared to leave an allegation hanging that the wrong motives were driving decision-making on this most important of issues. And I would refer the council to the comments that Maggie Oller has made since the publication of this review, when she states she has confidence in the individuals who have carried out this review.
Now, you could just make out at the end of that clip the words "cover up." Somebody shouted them at Andy Burnham. Now, you may think, okay, but this is just the public heckling him in Manchester. But the issue has continued to dog him. It hasn't gone away. And you heard Burnham there in that video mention the former police detective and now whistleblower Maggie Oliver. And of course, saying that she then subsequently ended up being happy with what he then put in place. That's not entirely accurate. Now, here is the GB News report on it. That is GB News reporting, dated the 20th of June. Headlined: husband of grooming gang victim killed himself over stress of investigation, former police detective claims. A former police detective, constable, that's Maggie Oliver, has claimed a husband of a grooming gang victim killed himself over the investigation. Victims of grooming gangs in Oldham, Manchester, have received official apologies after a major report said police and the local council failed to protect some youngsters from sexual exploitation. Now, that is, as reported on your screens there by GB News, Maggie Oliver has personally been posting about Oldham and Andy Burnham since 2022 at least. Here on your screens is a 2022 post by Maggie Oliver decrying some of the failures of Greater Manchester Police. We can read it for you here. It says, Maggie Oliver: Sophie's life has been turned upside down by the failure of Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council to be honest. She believes this is why her father took his own life. And of course, that's the headline that we just read for you. But even that's from 2022. But even as recently as this leadership election, Maggie Oliver has returned to GB News to make it very clear exactly what Andy Burnham's failures were when it comes to the grooming gangs or the underage rape, group-based sexual exploitation of underage children. And as you can see here, GB News reports he ducked out, and I think he looked at his own political position. Maggie Oliver says that Andy Burnham attempted to become Prime Minister is not in the best interest of the country based off of his previous work on grooming gang inquiries. We're just going to play you Maggie Oliver explaining what she objects to when it comes to Andy Burnham potentially becoming Prime Minister.
Please, about your experiences of Andy Burnham.
Yeah, I've got quite a long history with Burnham, and I know him reasonably well. I have to give credit where credit's due. He did announce 2 independent inquiries into Augusta, which I worked on in 2005, and the Rochdale shambolic inquiry from 2012, which I worked on also. And whilst I have to say that those 2 independent inquiries were quite thorough and actually gave me credibility because everything I had been saying was true. I also have to say that the Oldham inquiry that was squeezed in the middle, in my opinion, as me personally, not as the chair of my foundation, was a cover-up on all levels. And the final part of his independent inquiry was meant to be the assurance review, an utter exercise. All survivors, all victims were forbidden from speaking. Independent inquiry. The 2 professionals who had been working on the Rochdale, the Augusta inquiries, who had worked on it for 7 years, resigned. Were brought in, and we got a glowing reference of what GMP are doing now, which I can say was not based on a single victim or survivor's testimony. It was a paper exercise where the police were able to say that everything was now hunky-dory. So what I would say is that Andy Burnham really did me a favour personally, and he didn't pull punches when looking at the failures of the past. But when it came to exposing what is now going on, he ducked out. And I think he looked at his own political position. More respect for him if he had gone the full Monty and actually looked at what was going on today. So I feel that this latest attempt to promote himself as a leader of the country is not in the best interests of the country on any level.
There we have it. That's Maggie Oliver making clear that her view, and this is, of course, the former police detective whistleblower, the most prominent voice, perhaps, investigative and legal powers ground, to be crying the state of the cover-up around the underage rape groom gangs. That's Maggie Oliver stating very clearly her own view that she believes Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester was, as mayor, complicit in the cover-up with regards to his own city, though he helped her in 2 other different cities, not his own turf. In his own turf, he covered up their failures. And that is a damning indictment of Andy Burnham on the subject of grooming gangs, which is why we believe that that's not going away. This subject of underage rape gangs is going to come to haunt the Labour Party. Of course, it haunted Keir Starmer after he whipped every single Labour MP to vote against the statutory inquiry. But now with this involvement by Andy Burnham, it will continue to haunt Burnham as well. One key observation at this point is that Burnham has never been tested as a party leader or prime minister, and to jump into both roles at once without any preparation in a very sudden manner may well test his mettle beyond what the Labour Party could tolerate. And so that's on the grooming gangs case. Another very controversial topic that the Labour Party under Burnham are going to have to face is the trans kids debate. And on your screens now, you should be able to just blow this up for you so you can see it. Again, on the trans kids and puberty blockers and underage children subject, Andy Burnham has form. Here he is photographed on a rally supporting rights for queer kids, which fine, whatever, each to their own. But of course, the problem, as we're going to demonstrate, is that there's a hot potato live issue at the moment about the fact that 11-year-olds in Britain, it is being decided but appealed at the moment. So it still potentially won't happen. But right now, as it stands, 11-year-olds are set to be given or have the right to be given puberty blockers. And it's a huge controversy in the UK to prevent children from growing up chemically preventing puberty with potentially irreversible damage. Now, as you can see here on this post by James SS, this is a reminder that Andy Burnham, it says, is a full-blown gender ideologue. As mayor of Greater Manchester, he oversaw £100,000 of funding for an organisation helping children to get puberty blockers. Labour cannot be trusted on child safeguarding. This is a topic that isn't going to go away for Andy Burnham because it's a live topic at the moment. There you see in the blue cardigan, not in the suit, but in the blue cardigan with spectacles in the middle. That's Andy Burnham. And behind him, the banner reads, "Queer kids deserve safe schools." Now, the reason this topic isn't going away is because as it currently stands, as we just demonstrated, there is a huge fight, even within the Labour Party, over whether or not 11-year-olds should be given puberty blockers, whether they should be allowed to access such potentially life-altering medication. Here is the BBC News report on it. You can see that dated 19th of June, and we'll just blow that up for you and read it for you as well at the same time. So let's see, get this on your screens. That should be now enlarged so you can all see minimum age of 11 set for UK puberty blocker trial. It is shocking indeed to read from that BBC article. Again, this is recent, 19th of June 2026. This is a couple of days ago. It says gender questioning children will have to be at least 11 years old to take part in a clinical trial assessing the risks and benefits of puberty blocking drugs. The planned pathways trial, external, was paused in February 2026 after the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA, raised safety concerns and suggested introducing a minimum age of 14, where none had been set previously. There used to be no minimum age on this stuff. It says discussions with the research team have allowed a number of safeguards, including participation age to be strengthened. The first children are expected to be recruited in August, although ongoing legal action by some clinicians and campaigners questioning the trial safety and ethics may delay that. Now, see what the Labour Party and the Labour government have done. They've said they've strengthened safeguards. What do they mean by strengthening safeguards? Well, there used to be no minimum age on when you could give children these puberty blockers. And their definition of strengthening safeguards is to take it from having no minimum age to stopping a child's puberty chemically to now saying, okay, we can do it to 11-year-olds and over. The report into this itself by the MHRA, or the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority, suggested 14. But the Labour government, its definition of strengthening safeguards is to stay at 11. Now, this is a hugely controversial topic. And as you can see, Andy Burnham, as Mayor of Greater Manchester, gave £100,000 to an organisation that is lobbying for the right to give these children puberty blockers. It isn't going away. And already today, it is a controversial topic, even for Labour MPs in Parliament itself. Here is Jonathan Hinder. He's a Labour MP. This is crucial. He's a Labour MP opposing this in Parliament. He says MPs are scheduled to vote on the puberty blockers trial today. This is a video from today we're going to show you. Drugging physically healthy children to stop them turning into adults. Madness, he says. Of course, we agree with that. It is madness. Our own view on that is the same. It's absolutely mad for this to be happening. And here is the video of this Labour MP making this point in Parliament. Here's Jonathan Hinder MP complaining about his own government and puberty blockers.
And uneasy. If I'm being totally honest, I don't think it is wrong. Look at that screen. Puberty suppressed degree alongside of it. Let them be. If only they had let Kira Bell be, who had these treatments much older than these children are going to be given it. And uneasy. If I'm being totally honest, I don't think he best. It is wrong. Look at that screen. Puberty alongside of it. Let them be. If only they had let Kira Bell be, who had these treatments much older than these children are going to be given it.
So that is a Labour MP, and he's giving the example of Kira Bell, who later regretted taking puberty blockers after having taken them, and is now campaigning to stop this. This is live in Parliament. Well, it's not live now, but this was live in Parliament today. This was a question a Labour MP was putting to his own government. It is madness. He's taken the view it's madness. He said so clearly in his own post at the last word there in his tweet there. It says madness. We take this view that's on your screens now, responding to the BBC article that we just read for you. And we've said this is disgusting. There is clearly only one word for that. It's, it is a crazy. It is disgusting. It is madness that 11-year-olds could be prevented from going through puberty by a choice that their underage minds make at 11. And meanwhile, while they are being experimented on in this way, remember what this means: preventing the development of their sexual organs, a form of sexual abuse. How does consent apply there for an 11-year-old? Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's government is proud of the fact that it's using protecting children online to ban access to social media for under 16-year-olds. So let's get this straight. An under 16-year-old, this is an important point, folks. Let me just turn that screen off to face you directly on this point. We've got a current Labour government headed by Keir Starmer at the moment, and potentially in future headed by Andy Burnham. Makes no difference, because both of them appear to have the same view on this, and therefore the Labour government's view won't change. And that is that they've decided that they can ban 16-year-olds from accessing social media due to the vulnerability of their minds and how social media may well indeed manipulate their minds. And due to that vulnerability, the Labour Party doesn't want 16 or under accessing social media. There will be a ban for under 16s to access social media in the UK. Meanwhile, An 11-year-old, according to the Labour Party, does have the mental capacity to decide that they are not a boy or that they are not a girl, that they've been born in the wrong body, and that they can irreversibly alter the way that their body grows their sexual organs by stopping and blocking puberty chemically. So an 11-year-old can make that decision, but at the same time, a 16 or 15-year-old can't access social media. It is a very, very strange position that the Labour government has taken, explained by the fact, of course, as you saw Andy Burnham there giving £100,000 as a grant as Mayor of Manchester to an organisation that was lobbying for this change. Also explained by the fact that Keir Starmer and the Labour government clearly don't care about the mental well-being of children. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowing 11-year-olds to block their own puberty. And so this online safety in 16-year-olds, what that's really about is introducing digital ID for every single citizen by stealth, using the name of the children and protecting the children as the excuse. Of course, every adult would have to then prove they are over 16 to be able to access social media, or at least prove they are not under 16. And that's how you introduce digital ID by stealth. It's a project that the former Labour leader and Prime Minister Tony Blair has been seeking to introduce in this country ever since the War on Terror years. They would, by hook or by crook, seek to introduce digital ID in this country because they're globalists and they seek, indeed, the technocracy. So anyone square that circle, we'd argue it's quite a difficult circle to square, and that is 11-year-olds are presumably mature enough mentally to decide they're in the wrong body and they can block their puberty, but not mature enough mentally to access social media such as Facebook or Instagram. It is an incredibly strange position. Andy Burnham's going to find himself in the middle of such a position, and therefore, again, a storm is coming his way, because on both of those topics, the underage grooming gangs and the underage rape, and on the puberty blockers and children and trans children topic, the British public is on the other end of these topics, nowhere near where the Labour government thinks is a defensible position. And the British public is likely to be enraged by both of these topics if Labour don't back down. And that's all coming for Burnham. Another topic that is potentially going to get Burnham into trouble is defence and foreign policy. Now, very few really understand what Burnham's foreign policy will look like, but Keir Starmer has made sure that there's a ticking time bomb in the form of defence that is going to come up to haunt any potential premiership of Andy Burnham. And that defence topic could also very well damage Andy Burnham's potential premiership. So let's give an example as to what we're talking about, and that is time from the 23rd of June 2026. You can see that, should be able to see it on your screens now. And it says Keir Starmer sets up row with Andy Burnham over defence plan. The subheading: the outgoing Prime Minister will push on and bring the spending proposal to NATO despite his likely successor wanting it to be delayed. We're just going to read a section from the Times on that. It says, Sir Keir Starmer will push ahead with plans to publish the long-awaited Defence Investment Plan, or DIP, before the NATO summit on July the 7th, even though his successor would not have signed up to it. The Prime Minister faces a row with Andy Burnham, who, the Times has been told, wants it delayed. That's Andy Burnham. He wants the defence review delayed until he enters Downing Street. Burnham is said to be keen to examine the plans and make the decision himself. Starmer has promised to publish the document before the summit in Ankara, however, where President Trump will be examining Allied progress on meeting the 3.5% pledge by 2035. That is, that each country who's a member of NATO needs to spend 3.5% of their GDP on defense. And that's a pledge which Trump wants in place by 2035, because each NATO member is already bound by that pledge. They just haven't been sticking to it, which is what the Americans are so upset about. The summit, it says, going back to the Times, is taking place on July the 7th, before nominations to replace Starmer are opened on July the 9th. Burnham, the former mayor of Greater Manchester, could be in number 10 on July the 17th. Attending the summit without a defence plan or any commitment for substantial new money for the department would be deeply humiliating for Starmer. So Starmer's going to press ahead with this anyway, and what doing so will leave is a huge headache for Burnham, who may or may not agree with whatever the review states. Keep in mind, John Healey, the former Defence Secretary under Starmer, resigned The former defense secretary resigned over this very topic of Starmer not spending enough on defense. So this is another topic that's going to come to haunt Burnham. And likewise, the question of Middle East peace. Here is Al Jazeera English reporting that an old clip has resurfaced showing Andy Burnham saying Israel would be his first overseas visit if he was elected to the PM. We're just going to play that for you as well, because it does remain unclear exactly what Burnham stands for when it comes to the Middle East.
40 years that simply hasn't worked for people and places in this country. Many people do about what's been going on there as Mayor of Greater Manchester.
What would your approach be to foreign policy in terms of what's going on in Gaza and the ongoing genocide there?
I was one of those who called for a ceasefire. Right now, I've got to focus on the by-election. That is my focus. Facing major charges raises serious questions about counter-terrorism policy.
It was the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Now, some of that video you can see there. So
A day of sorrow, break up what has been Greater Manchester's success. I do feel we're at a crucial moment.
We'll include that video in the stream tomorrow because most of it is text. And so you weren't able to clearly hear what the text was saying. But basically, the point is that Burnham appears to have contradictory positions on the Middle East. And that's what's causing some concern around exactly what his stance is. On one hand, he said Israel would be the first country he would visit if ever he became Labour leader. On the other hand, he was opposed to Keir Starmer's approach during the Gaza ethnic cleansing, and so appeared to take a more critical stance alongside the rest of the backbencher Labour MPs. At the time, he wasn't an MP, he was Mayor of Manchester. So there is some confusion as to exactly where he stands on foreign policy. But the main point here is that this NATO and defence spending topic is going to come to haunt Andy Burnham. Now, all of this has led to Nigel Farage, as we started the stream with, demanding a general election to fix what he says is broken Britain. We're going to play you that speech by Farage as well. This was Nigel Farage's immediate reaction upon learning of Keir Starmer's resignation.
Midlands, Yorkshire, all the north of England, Reform scored absolutely stunning victories in areas that Labour had dominated for the best part of 100 years. The sheer scale of our victory against Labour, this Prime Minister could not survive. And because of that, Burnham steps forward and wins quite convincingly the Makerfield by-election, ironically with the same message that we had in the local elections. Ours was vote reform, get Starmer out. His was vote Burnham, get Starmer out. Unbelievably, we're about to have our 6th Prime Minister in 7 years. I remember growing up thinking Italy was totally and yet that's where we are here. Why is it all happening? And why did we get that big number of 2016, we voted Brexit. Much of our political establishment has never accepted the result. And even those that reluctantly did, namely the Conservative Party, refused to implement what voters demanded, namely lower levels of immigration and more freedom for our sole traders and small businesses. They were just two of the benefits we could have taken having got back self-governance. Under Starmer, the Labour Party has moved much closer back to the European Union. And if Mr. Burnham wins, they'll go closer still, which means Labour voters and the Labour Party are completely divided on this issue. But the bigger point today is that of a mandate, is that of legitimacy. I've no idea whether there'll be a contest or a coronation. But what I do know is the British public have simply had enough political parties chopping and changing their leaders at will. We vote for somebody in a general election to serve their term. And barring ill health or exceptional circumstances, what is going on here, frankly, is reminiscent of a banana republic that has totally devalued. We at Reform demand a general election. After all, when the Conservatives were chopping and changing prime ministers, Labour kept saying there should be a general election. On that point, the Conservative Party say there's no need for a general election because they're part, frankly, of Labour did not actually carry out their mandate of 24, did a whole number of things. A whole number of things, whether it was the tax on family farms, the giving away of the Chagos Islands and much else that wasn't in the manifesto. If it is Mr. Burnham, he didn't even stand at the last general election. Britain is broken. 6 prime ministers in 7 years should convince you of that fact. We are ready for a general election, and I suspect many of you too are ready for a general election. The thought we're going to go through weeks, maybe months of paralysis in a country whose debt is rising faster than any country in the world, apart from Botswana, where the boats continue to come across the English Channel every day. The whole thing is not acceptable. Let's have a general election. Let's get a government with a clear democratic mandate.
Now, there you have it. You heard Nigel Farage there demanding a general election. The country is sick and tired, he says, of the constant rotation or musical chairs played by prime ministers. The New Statesman, a left-wing, well-established left-wing magazine in the UK, has, though this is an opinion column in the New Statesman, it's fair to say it has signaled that it also agrees with this sentiment by publishing this column. It says the age of the unelected prime minister. That's the column title. And then you can see that on your screens. The public didn't vote for Andy Burnham and they hate this way of doing politics, writes Rachel Cunliffe. And that's for the New Statesman, a left-wing British magazine, which also now appears to be at least signalling that it doesn't agree with the fact that Burnham could become prime minister without a mandate. And here are, as posted by Politics UK, the various prime ministers we've had in the last 10 years. The UK, it says, will shortly have its 7th prime minister in 10 years after Keir Starmer's resignation. And you can see the list of PMs there. Bottom right we'll start with. In fact, maybe we can blow this up for you so you can see it properly on your screens. Let's just get this larger. But the bottom right is some of you is what. Then after him was another Conservative Prime Minister, Theresa May, July 2016 to July 2019. And again, Brexit is what brought her down. And then that brought in Boris Johnson to get Brexit done. And that was a Conservative Prime Minister from July 2019 to September 2022. And COVID brought him down. His, of course, reaction to COVID was to party in Downing Street while locking the rest of the nation down. So that's what brought Boris Johnson down. Then perhaps one of the shortest serving living prime ministers shortest serving prime ministers in living memory, Liz Truss, Conservative, became prime minister from September 2022 to November 2022, a mere 2 months. Liz Truss's misfortune was that she became prime minister, and the country was then hit with the misfortune of the Queen suddenly dying the very next day after Liz Truss became prime minister. She scrambled to sort that out, submitted a budget which spooked the markets, and in a financial coup, globalists managed to oust Liz Truss within just 2 months, bringing in a banker that they felt they had more confidence in, and that was Rishi Sunak, another Conservative prime minister from October 2022 to July 2024. Rishi Sunak was defeated by the Labour Party, and that brought in Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer has been the Labour Party's prime minister from July 2024 until now. But of course, he's due to step down as well. And that's to Nigel Farage's point that as you can see, the text here saying the UK will shortly have its 7th prime minister in 10 years. And here you can see in a post by Shashank Joshi, for those keeping count, that will be 7 UK prime ministers in just over 10 years. You can see the chart. Starmer also holds the record for being the toppled PM with the largest ever majority in the Commons, much larger than Thatcher in 1990. You can see why he's confused. But the rotation of leaders puts the UK here among countries like Romania, Bulgaria, France, Moldova, Austria. You can see the chart on your screens. Italy's on there too. Farage mentioned Italy in his speech. These are all countries that have had a huge rotation in their leaderships. And it's not very good for the country to be so unstable and for the leaderships to keep changing in that way. And so Farage's solution is to demand a general election to get a huge mandate for whichever, not just leader, but actually governing philosophy the country would like to see, because there is clearly a huge gap between what the country stands for and what the Labour Party stands for. And that gap is demonstrable by the survey results. So it's not imaginary, it's clear. If you do a public opinion poll, you'll find that the majority of the public support the Reform Party. And yet, because we're stuck in this moment with the Labour having this huge majority in Parliament, we're going to end up with a Prime Minister even more left-wing than Keir Starmer, while the public is to the right of the Conservative Party with Reform. On some issues, such as immigration, to the right of the Conservative Party. On other issues, Reform are not to the right of the Conservative Party, having succeeded in some former Labour areas due to their Brexit vote as well. So these are the topics that are coming to haunt Andy Burnham. They are going to cause a lot of problems for him. The grooming gangs topic, the underage puberty blockers for 11-year-old children topic, the defense and foreign policy topic. And it may well be that we end up soon in the UK having to go through yet another general election to settle all of these topics once and for all. That's all we've got time for on this Warrior Creed live stream. You can see the ticker at the bottom, majidnawaz.substack.com. If you go there, you can subscribe to Radical Media. We ask everybody to become a premium paying subscriber. You get access to the behind the paywall content, the full weekly newsletter, The Radical Dispatch, not just the free parts. And also you get the podcast version of this stream. You also get access to other long form podcasts, such as our interview podcast called The Radical Podcast, which are one-on-one long form interviews with prominent figures. And we do those quite regularly, as well as other paywall content. So go to Radical Media, majidnawaz.substack.com, and sign up and become a premium paying subscriber. We will see you next week for the Warrior Creed live stream. You've been listening to The Radical, Majid Nawaz. Until next time.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.